Well, good morning. Good morning. Good morning on this Friday. Friday, I believe is the proper pronunciation for the word. Friday, the 6th of February. And good morning to you. Welcome. Welcome to the broadcast and Fagan show. We're here on KOAN, KVNT, 95.1 FM, 95.2 FM in the Valley, 1080 AM in Anchorage, 1020 AM in the Valley. Windy, which makes the cold colder, doesn't it? I think it's actually a high wind warning that's in effect for the Matsu Valley and other parts of south central Alaska all the way through this evening. Boy, it does get windy out in the valley. There was some wind damage yesterday, a couple of nothing overly damaging, but a couple of roofs were damaged slightly out the valley. Sheared off metal roofing of an apartment complex in Palmer. National Weather Service issued the warning yesterday, forecasting gusts of 60 to 70 miles an hour in Palmer, Wasilla, Sutton, and steady north to northeast winds of 25 to 35 miles an hour. Wind warnings were also issued for the Prince William Sound town of Valdez and for Juneau and southeast. Gusts of 80 miles an hour were forecast for Thursday night in Valdez. 80 miles an hour. That's a fast wind. Gusts were expected to be up to 90 miles an hour in downtown Juneau, according to the Weather Service senior forecaster Bob Tkach. One 82-mile-an-hour gust had been recorded in Douglas yesterday. Weather Service cautions travel during windstorm. While winds were calm in Anchorage on Thursday afternoon, they're expected to pick up last night and continue to be fairly strong this morning. I got a pretty good gust when I walked outside. Oh, it's cold when it's windy. South central winds could taper off by tonight, though gusts might linger through the weekend. So if you own a kite, that would be time to go out and sail your kite, or you want to go sailing, hit the lake, the frozen lake. One power outage reported in the Fairview Loop area outside of Wasilla. 400 customers were out of MEA power, but they've got that working now, hopefully. So that's the deal with the weather. It's not nearly as cold as it has been. It's warmed up a little bit, which is nice. This time yesterday it was 0 in Anchorage. Right now it's 21. 18 in Palmer, 18 in Wasilla. Eagle River 21. Girdwood, that can't be right. It says -2 in Girdwood. I mean, this is some kind of inversion or something. I don't know what that's all about. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. We're streaming live, danfagan.us, audio and video. Email me, danfaganshow@icloud.com. danfaganshow@icloud.com. It's Ronald Reagan's birthday today, be 103. Ronald Reagan is a testament to the fact that one man can change history. When you look at the 70s, and what Jimmy Carter did to this country, how he brought it down to probably its lowest level in the 20th century. Gas prices, gas lines, gas rationing, inflation through the roof. People didn't respect us globally. Soviet Union invades Russia. What does Jimmy Carter do? He punishes U.S. athletes by keeping them out of the Olympics. He's a very weak president. He's turned out to be a hyper anti-Semitic leftist in his post-presidency years. But Ronald Reagan turned that all around. In four short years, Ronald Reagan changed this country, and he He ran in 84. He was elected initially in 80, and he ran in 84. And what I think was probably the best political commercial in the history of our country. It's Morning in America again. And it just resonated with the American people. Yes, this is a very different country with Ronald Reagan as president compared to Jimmy Carter. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that's very interesting about this. In 1984, Reagan won in a landslide, but did you know that 39% of people who voted in that race did not vote for Reagan? And here's why that's interesting. I've always believed in my lifetime there is and has been and continues to be about 35 to 40% of our country that are just clueless. They're hard leftist. They think Republicans are evil. And they're always going to get at least 35 to 40% of the vote. How do you not vote for Reagan to be reelected? Never has there been a greater change in a shorter period of time than from the day Ronald Reagan took over from Jimmy Carter to the day he ran for reelection. And yet 39% of the country voted for Walter Mondale. Could you believe it? You know, Reagan was meeting with Gorbachev as he was attempting to win the Cold War without firing a shot. And this is 1986. It was in Iceland, Reykjavik. And Gorbachev was going broke. He couldn't keep up with the escalation of the U.S. arms race. He just couldn't keep up, and he was losing leverage. And for the first time in history, Gorbachev or anyone from the Soviet Union admitted, okay, we'll change our human rights policies. The Soviet Union was a murderous regime. And so they're getting close to a deal to reduce their nuclear weapons and to actually have peace. But Gorbachev insisted that Reagan dismantle what the media called Star Wars, which is the Strategic Defense Initiative. You know, the technology that would shoot missiles out of the air, purely a defensive technology. And Reagan said no. He was slaughtered in the media. When he came back from Reykjavik 1 without a deal, the media said Reagan never wants peace. Reagan's a cowboy. Reagan, and they slaughtered him. The media did. His approval ratings plummeted. 6 months later, they met again, and they signed an agreement. In his memoirs, Mikhail Gorbachev admitted that the reason the agreement happened was because Reagan held strong on SDI. That's a leader. Man of conviction. He changed history. 614, Dan Fagan. Yeah, that Ronald Reagan, he was the real deal. I really honestly believe that if you're going to be effective in changing or leaving the world a better place after you've left it, if you're going to be someone who makes a difference, improves the lives of those around you, you have to let go of the desire to be liked and popular. When Ronald Reagan left the Reykjavik summit, so close to a deal with Gorbachev, but he held on to the Strategic Defense Initiative. People were convinced we'd never have peace with the Soviet Union. And they love, the media loved Gorbachev. Gorbachev has done all that he can do, and yet Mr. Reagan will not budge. He's a warmonger. He's a cowboy. But Reagan knew in his heart that the Soviet Union would not be able to develop this similar technology. They didn't have the money. And it would give America dominance militarily as long as we had SDI, and they didn't. And Gorbachev knew that too. And sometimes it's so easy to compromise, to get along, to go along, and to be popular. But you never move the needle when you do that. You never advance the cause when you compromise something that's a core fundamental principle. And that's a lesson we've learned from Reagan. The conservative movement in the United States, which really has grown, and even though we've had a setback with Obama, but we've seen the conservative movement grow continually, really since the early '60s. Goldwater clearly was the initiator of the conservative movement. Of course, he lost. Then we got Nixon, who was not a conservative, and then Gerald Ford. And of course, Ford lost in 1980 to Reagan, and that was the conservative movement's coming out, and it changed history. 8 years of a true conservative as president. We're still enjoying the prosperity of the Reagan policies. And then when you had George W. Sr., who I think is a wonderful man, very tender-hearted fellow, he kind of killed the Reagan Revolution by raising taxes. We lost all credibility. George Bush Sr. looked at the Republican convention in 1988 and said, "Read my lips. No new taxes." It was a powerful moment. I remember it well. And the way the speech went was, they'll come to me and they'll say, "We must raise taxes." And I'll say no. And they'll come to me again and say, "You must raise taxes." And I'll say no again. And then he said, and they'll come to me again and again saying, "You must raise taxes." And I'll say, "Read my lips. No new taxes." Crowd goes crazy. Such a powerful moment. 2 years into his term, he raises taxes. Killed the Reagan Revolution. We get Bill Clinton, Slick Willie. And, to Bill Clinton's credit, and fortunately for the United States, Bill Clinton was not an ideologue like Obama is. Bill Clinton did not want to radically transform America. He just wanted to do well with the ladies, I think. I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing. He just wanted to have a good time. And so he did whatever was popular. And because of that, we got some good things out of Clinton, frankly. The Welfare Reform Act of 1986 revolutionized inner city America. because it cut off the time period in which you can get free stuff from the government. Inner city America, before the Welfare Reform Act of 1996, was just a cesspool of crime and drugs, and it was just terrible. Now, there's still some bad neighborhoods, but it was nothing like it was before that. Because basically what we did, we sent a message to America: look, you can't live off the government the rest of your life. This idea of you and your son and your grandson and your great grandson and all of you just living off government, or same for daughter, granddaughter, you got to at some point get a job. And it changed the whole thinking in inner city America. Now, Obama with Obamacare has reinstated all that. He took away he brought us back to where we were pre-Welfare Reform Act 1996. And so we had George Bush killed the Reagan Revolution. Bill Clinton kind of came along, was a total scoundrel. Do you have any idea what a big deal it is to be the leader of the free world and you're having sex with an intern in the White House? It's not that he's having sex. It's not that he's unfaithful to his wife. That's not really the story. The story is he made himself as a man extremely vulnerable to blackmail. And not the kind of blackmail where you give me money, but if anyone knew about this before it all came out, and they went to the president and said, Mr. President, we need you to do thus and thus, or we're going to expose you for having sex with an intern in the White House. It made him very vulnerable. That's really the big story with Clinton and Lewinsky. Many a great leader has had sex outside of marriage. And I'm not condoning that. David in the Bible had sex with someone outside of his wife. I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying that that's an admirable thing. But when you're the leader of the free world and you put yourself into a vulnerable position of being blackmailed like that, that was the thing that made it such a big deal. So Clinton came along, didn't do too bad as president because he just wanted to be liked, so he did what was popular. And then George Bush came along, and, of course, you had the war. You had Afghanistan and Iraq. But the thing about George Bush that is so admirable is that he cut taxes in a big way. And that really spurred the economy. I mean, he cut taxes big time. Now, he spent too much domestically, in my opinion. But I believe he did a good job prosecuting the war against Islam, and then he cut taxes. So I'd give him a passing grade. And, of course, then we get our Marxist, communist, leftist, thinks America is a terrible place president, Barack Hussein Obama. Jimmy Carter gave us Ronald Reagan. I believe Barack Obama will give us another Ronald Reagan because he has so exposed the left and the blame America first crowd. That 39% that voted for Walter Mondale in 1984. Just what these folks are about. I'm expecting huge things out of the presidential election. And I don't know if it's Scott Walker. I don't know who it's going to be. But whoever it is, I believe they will have the same impact. Look, all you got to do, you don't have to be the Michael Jordan of politics. You don't have to be the Mickey Mantle. You don't have to be super talented, skilled. I mean, Reagan was a great communicator, yes, but Reagan's main attribute and strength was he was a man of conviction, and what he believed to be true and real was what he acted upon, not what would make him popular. That's how you change history. If you want to be liked, if you watch the poll numbers, if you propose this because it'll help your poll numbers, you propose that because it'll make you more popular, you're just a waste of space. So I'm so optimistic for the future of our country. Folks, I cannot tell you what a big deal it was that we regained control of the Senate in November. It was such a big deal. And we did it in such a profound way. There was just no doubt this country has rejected leftism, the vast majority of this country. There'll always be the 40 percenters. So it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to read the news, listen to talk radio, watch the television news, and go, oh, this country's such a mess. And we have some problems. We've got way too many people who've given up on life and decided the government is the way to live the rest of, depending on the government, or really dependent on other people to pay their bills, is the way they're going to live out the rest of their lives. And that's so tragic. It's tragic for the people who decided that. It's tragic for the people who have to pay for that. So we're gonna get a president who's going to lead and is going to explain to the American people there's a better way. You do have all the gifts and ability and talent you need to make it in life. You don't need other people to pay your way. That message, which, by the way, is very different than a lot of conservatives, the message a lot of conservatives are given. A lot of conservatives will say to people who are dependent on government, you lazy bum, get a job. That's not a very appealing message. I would say to the able-bodied working adults who have decided to collect disability and get their free cell phone and get all this stuff from government, there's a better way. You will find life so much more fulfilling, enjoyable, pleasurable if you go out and make your own way and you earn your own money. You will transform yourself as an individual if you give up on the idea of other people paying your bills. That's the message to the dependent crowd. Don't persecute them. Don't put them down. Don't call them lazy bums. Let them know there's a better way. Because there is a better way. We have been given everything we need to succeed in life by our Creator. Everything we need. And if we just employ the right decision-making process in life, remain grateful for what we already have, we'll be fine. $569-1080. Well, this is a big deal. Alice Rogoff, publisher of the Alaska Dispatch, Daily News, or whatever it's called, she finally got in touch with me. I've been trying to get in touch with her for weeks now. She responded to something that I put on Facebook yesterday. I'll let you know what it is and what she said right after this. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show at 6:30. Well, good morning. 6:35 in the morning here on Friday, February 6th. Congratulations. You've made it to the Friday, and we're glad you're here. It's the Dan Fagan radio show on AM 1080 in Anchorage, FM 95.1, 95.2 in the Valley on FM, and then 1020 AM in the Valley. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Our streaming is on danfagan.us, danfagan.us. Good to have you here with us this morning. I finally got a response out of Alice Rogoff. She's the publisher of the Alaska Dispatch Daily News, or whatever it's called. And as you know, if you've listened to this show at any time, it is my opinion that the Daily News Dispatch has been grossly biased in favor of our current governor. I've never seen a more one-sided coverage of a governor's race than the Dispatch displayed. And it appears to me that Ms. Rogoff and her team over there, they're very favorable of our current governor. They like the unity idea, and they're kind of giving the guy a pass, not asking tough questions, not covering any stories that would reflect positive or poorly on the current governor. So I wrote yesterday on my Facebook page, I said, here's the side of the story Governor Walker's press secretary, Alice Rogoff, leaves out. And then I talked about him cutting 300 workers, but 30 of them are part-time and half of those jobs are empty. So basically he's cutting 135 workers out of 24,000 state employees. I wrote, keep in mind, 7 years ago, we had 16,000 state employees, and we were just fine. Now we got 24,000. He's cutting 135 of them. The Palin Parnell team grew state employees to 24,000, and that's where we are today. So here comes Bill Unity Walker to the rescue, cutting 135 out of 24,000 employees. That's a 0.5625% cut of the state workforce. Let me give you that again. 0.5625. Keep in mind, labor boss Vince Beltrami practically bought Mr. Walker this governorship, the same Beltrami who has spent his entire life fighting for the state to grow more state employees. Coincidence, I ask. So it was a little jab at Ms. Rogoff, calling her the Governor Walker's press secretary. I suppose it was unkind, but here's what she writes. Dan, I'm usually a pretty good sport about a joke in my experience at my expense, but this is just plain misleading. I am as disconnected from the Walker administration or any office of any level of government as anyone can be. Well, I appreciate the response. By the way, Dave Steeren goes on there and he says, rolls his eyes. Well, I appreciate Ms. Rogoff at least responding to me, because I've been wanting to ask her why her paper is. Well, here's what I wrote to her when she wrote that on my Facebook page. I said, Alice, it's good to finally hear from you. I think most people know you are not press secretary for Bill Walker. I obviously wrote that to make a point. It is my strongly held opinion during the election your paper attacked former Governor Parnell and supported Governor Walker in an unprecedented way. And your paper continues to cover for Mr. Walker, refusing to ask tough questions and ignoring stories that might reflect poorly on him. As you know, I have contacted you several times to discuss this with you and get your side of the story, but until now you have not responded. Maybe there is a logical explanation for what I would consider heavily biased coverage coming from your paper. I would be happy to either meet with you or have you on my show and give you an opportunity to tell your side of the story. Well, at least we know she's alive. That's good. It's my opinion, and frankly, it's the opinion of a lot of other people, that the Alaska Dispatch News has become more of an activist publication than a journalist publication. I would imagine people who are fans of Bill Walker love the Alaska Dispatch News. I would imagine the left, they love the Alaska Dispatch News. But for conservatives, free market people, we I think most of us look at it as a publication that most leftists, they just don't get conservative thought. They don't get why the free market's better than the private or the public sector. They just don't get it. They literally just can't see it. And so when we criticize their coverage, I can see how they might be confused by that, because in their minds, conservative thought does not exist. It's all about the government. All good things come from the government. Politicians who promote the growth of government are the ones that they agree with. So when we say, well, Ms. Rogoff, your coverage is so biased, I can see how she could not see what I'm saying. In her defense. Although to have a story on the National Guard pit trying to attack Sean Parnell on that just about every day before the election, a month out, and then to have who knows how many columns accusing Mr. Parnell of not caring if people, are assaulted sexually. It was so over the top. I just can't see. And this is, and I don't know if it's Alice or if it's Tony Hopfinger, who is kind of her right-hand man. But when they owned and controlled the Alaska Dispatch, they went after Joe Miller like there was no tomorrow. And listen, folks, I understand many people might say Joe Miller ran a horrific campaign and shot himself in the foot time and time again. I would not disagree with that. I would not disagree with that. But that does not excuse the Alaska Dispatch back then to so aggressively take on Miller and yet in no way, shape, or form hold Lisa Murkowski accountable. That was the most one-sided coverage of a campaign you will ever see. And guess what? They outdid themselves with Parnell. They went after Parnell harder than they went after Miller. And for Parnell, it's not like Parnell was calling press conferences and not answering questions. It's not like Parnell was, handcuffing journalists. Parnell was actually running, he's not that good of a campaigner, but he wasn't shooting himself in the foot. And yet Tony Hopfinger and Alice Rogoff went after him as though they had Alice Rogoff said this past weekend in Seattle at an Arctic conference that I am now in the messaging business. I bought a newspaper. I'm now in the messaging business. And I don't know that Ms. Rogoff or Mr. Hopfinger understand that it is not their job to tell us what to think. It's their job to report to us what's going on and to give us both sides of the story. Maybe they don't get that. And, maybe they do, and they just don't feel like they want to comply with that rule of journalism. I was in journalism for many years, and I would report things that sometimes it would absolutely kill me to report because, I would try to give both sides of the story, even though I typically lead right on all the issues. And so, but I would always try my very best to stay down the middle. Now, as a talk show host, it's different. People understand that I'm giving my opinion here. It's really, if Ms. Rogoff and Mr. Hopfinger were wise about this, they would understand that people who criticize them for being so blatantly biased are actually trying to help them, because they will not survive much longer if they continue down this one-sided path. Their credibility will get eroded fairly quickly. But I appreciate Mr. Rogoff responding, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity to sit down and talk. 569-1080. 6:44 in the morning. You are listening to the Dan Fagan Show. Because this break's so short. Don't you think? Yeah. Yeah. Good. No, I know that. No, I know you can't, but I guess that'd be JR I talked to. Because, if we get these long breaks at the top, bottom, and then hardly any. Yeah. Yeah. 6:46 in the morning. Good morning to you. Dan Fagan Show, broadcasting on KOAN, 95.1 FM, 1080 AM. Also KVNT, 95.2 FM, 1020 AM in the Matsu Valley. Our number, 569-1080, 569-1080. Email me, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Let's Deborah, good morning. Hello, Deborah. We lost her. All right. Call back, Deborah. We lost you there. 569-1080 if you'd like to join the broadcast. Let's see. There we go. I'll just take it. Let me see if I can get here. You there, Deborah?
I got cut off. Sorry, I got cut off on my car phone. Sorry.
Oh, no. Go ahead. You're on. We hear you fine.
Okay. One of the things that I remember from the Murkowski, the 2010 Senate race on Channel 7 was Matt Stelling and Steve McDonald were talking about how they hadn't vetted Senator Murkowski's challenger. And so that's what I think happened in 2010. I can't speak for what happened in terms of.
They said they had not vetted Joe
they,
Miller?
They did that they took responsibility for not vetting Joe Miller, and that they were two prominent Channel 11 and Channel 2 anchors.
Well, Matt Felling went to go work for Lisa Murkowski.
I understand that, but
yeah.
but I take what they said seriously, because I don't think that we vetted him in the primary like we should have, and that's when we found out about the subsidies and all the things that, because we thought she was the shoo-in, and then it was like, wow, and so then they vetted him. So that's all I want to say about it.
Well, no, I agree with you, Deborah.
So don't throw everybody. I wouldn't throw the dispatch under the bus.
Well,
just because you feel that, because I think a lot of journalists in 2010 didn't vet Joe Miller.
Yeah. Well, as I said, there's no doubt that Mr. Miller shot himself in the foot, gave journalists a lot of rope to hang him. He clearly, just ran a horrible campaign. There were things about him that were, like you say, he's coming out against government assistance, and that you learn he got government assistance. I mean, they're taking the poll and using his fellow co-workers' computers to do the poll. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, the whole thing with hiring the security and the bodyguards and all that. And it was some very strange things that happened. And I'm not going to say to you that I thought he was a good candidate. He was not a good candidate. But it was obvious to me personally, and this is just my opinion, many people may see it differently, that Alice Rogoff and Tony Hopfinger had it out to get Miller. Literally every day there was a different story trying to make him look bad, just as they had a story on Sean Parnell just about every day, trying to make him look bad. And to me, there's a pattern there. And, you know, you look at Parnell, who frankly was not that bad of a candidate, and you look at Joe Miller, who just ran a horrific campaign. But it doesn't excuse the fact that when it becomes very clear that a media organization is out to get a candidate, that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to justify Joe Miller as a candidate.
Well, in terms of Sean Parnell, he wasn't. I mean, in terms of his budgeting and a lot of things that he did, we're in the mess we're in because of him in the legislature. So, but that's, you know, that's your candidate, and I respect that. But let's be fair about it. But in terms of the Alaska Dispatch, I think Alaskans look around for, other than just taking the Alaska Dispatch as newsworthy, or that's where they get everything. I don't believe that. I think everybody looks around for information about candidates, or they hear things and they Google it. So, because I know a lot of people, other than my parents read they get the Alaska Dispatch and British Daily News every day at their home. So they're the people that read the paper. I don't know what that circulation is, but my parents certainly weren't gathering their information and voting on what was on the pages of the British Daily News.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of places to get information today, much more than ever before. But it's, you know, especially with Amanda Coyne and her blog, that was such a great thing to have her in the mix. But the bottom line about media, Deborah, is that typically the local newspaper will drive what stories are covered, because most television news reporters don't have much experience. They're young, they're new to the area. And so they'll get together in their morning meetings, and what do? They pick the paper up and go, what's the paper covering? And then they will follow suit. That's typically what happens. Now, if you get a reporter like Rhonda McBride, who's seasoned, who knows the players, who has many contacts, she will come up with her own content. But there aren't a lot of Rhonda McBrides reporting news in Alaska right now on television. So I think the paper has a lot of power. It may not be that everybody gets their news from the paper, but the paper does tend to drive which stories are covered, because the television reporters typically follow the newspaper's lead.
And that's true. And I've heard that from reporters who have left Channel 2 to other parts of the country, is that they don't know the backstory to oil and gas. They're just going on what they know of the day. And, you know,
Right.
And I have my energy blog, and they look at things, blah, blah, blah. What do I say about it? Well, I don't have a lot of opinions about it, because I leave it up to Alaskans to decide the content and what they want to believe. I don't sit there and make opinions on things that I post.
What's your blog?
Alaska Energy Dudes and Divas.
Alaska Energy Dudes and Divas?
Yeah.
I like that name. I'm going to check that out.
And so I haven't been posting a lot, mainly because of the election, and because I lose credibility when I get involved in elections and I start making opinions about things. And I leave it up to, especially when I post to my Facebook page, I leave it up to Alaskans to decide. And don't come to me if you're an environmentalist and want me to talk both sides. I don't. I'm very much pro-development, but also very rural Alaskan. And so those are the things that I post. And I've been asked to write more, so I'm going to write more. And I start a podcast in a couple of weeks. So it's just my side of the story, and so that Alaskans can have something other than maybe the Dispatch and the TV news. And the TV news will tell you, my friends who have left the Channel 2 News have said, we sit in meetings and I don't know oil and gas, but I have to report on it. And so they run around and they try to figure things out on the fly. and that's not news.
Yeah.
So I look to Tim Bradner,
he's
even
great.
before oil, and he's not emotional.
Yeah,
So he doesn't write things. And I get upset with him, and I'm like, I saw you at a meeting, and you didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. And then he writes a very balanced piece because he's not writing on the fly.
Yeah,
and emotional.
It's amazing how all the years I've read him, I still don't know if he's a conservative or a liberal, or I just know he knows his stuff. That Tim Bradner is an amazing, amazing journalist. It's such a great asset to our state. He writes for the Alaska Journal of Commerce, and hopefully we'll get him here on the show the next couple of weeks. He's an amazing guy. Deborah, thank you for your call. I appreciate that. Look, I understand that there's many places you can get information today. Dave Harbor has an incredible website, Alaska Gas Pipelines, I think it is. Just Google Dave Harbor and pipeline, and he gives you some in depth. He had a thing just the other day, a 3-part series on the governor trying to usurp the private sector and have Ada take over this McKenzie LNG plant deal. And he's such a great asset. And then you got Dave Stearns' radio show, which is fantastic. You got Glenn Beagle, who's on in the afternoon here on KOAN. And there's just so many places you can get great information locally. And of course, losing Amanda Coyne was a big hit. Amanda is not a conservative, but boy, she was so valuable because I thought she really tried to play fair. And even though her worldview and we have different worldviews, she was very fair, I thought, in the way that she presented her news. And that was a huge loss for the state when she went to go work for Dan Sullivan in Washington, D.C. Of course, it's his game. So those of us who are left behind here, we're just going to have to work that much harder and try to pick up her slack. All right, 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number. If you'd like to be a part of the broadcast a little bit later on the show, we're going to be talking to, actually, speaking of good reporters, Alexandra Gutierrez, who is a reporter for Alaska Public Radio. She, I'm told, is just really kicking butt down there in Juneau covering the session. And she's going to join us a little bit later in the broadcast. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. That's how you can email me. We're streaming live on Dan Fagan Show or danfagan.us. So glad you're here. Our number again, 569-1080. You are listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show. All right, welcome back. 6 minutes past 7 o'clock. Dan Fagan Show, KOAN, KVNT. Glad you're here. Good morning to you. 18 degrees in Anchorage, 16 in Wasilla, 15 in Palmer. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Happy to welcome to the broadcast an old friend, Lee Hudson. Lee, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan.
Lee is you're a counselor?
Yes, sir.
Working with?
I am actually in private practice.
Private practice.
I partner loosely with Cornerstone Health Associates. I did all my internship work there and still partner. We refer back and forth with them, but I am in private practice. I work alongside of another guy, but I'm on my own.
You got a great radio voice.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah. Of course, they tell me I have a great face for radio.
I gotta touch that.
Yeah. There you go. Well, I was very very moved by something you posted on Facebook. But it was about 4 or 5 days ago.
Yeah, thanks.
Talking about being a recovering addict. You want to talk about that? Tell me about that.
Sure. From which angle?
Well, just tell me your story. Tell me what happened.
Well, generally, the fear I have in talking about it is that most people associate addiction with something you take or something you drink or something you do or some kind of behavior kind of a thing. And I was thinking about that because I knew it would come up this morning. And my addiction stuff is kind of like one of them spiky balls you'd see in a video game, and it's a lot of things kind of put together. And so while there were some satellite behaviors that were not healthy, for me, there was one that kind of sat in the middle of that, and that was a really compulsive, insatiable desire to get people's approval. And so I didn't realize for probably 15, most of my adult life, that I would walk into a room or be in a meeting or be in a conversation, and I was sizing everybody up. And you can handle that when you're young and strong.
Yeah.
You can handle that when there's either financial gain associated with that or some kind of status, a position. I mean, for me, it was a very, very visible leader in an organization. And we don't realize that it just starts to put drag. I didn't realize it was just putting a drag on my identity and everything about me, and it started having some really serious downstream health effects because I was overworking. I'd hold my breath, and I would get through a certain part of my work, and then I would leave, and then go isolate and try to gather enough strength to come back and do that. Which again, you can do when you're young and strong, and you're in your 20s and whatnot. But I knew I was in trouble when I would sleep 14 hours and wake up exhausted.
Wow.
And started getting some stress related health issues that were coming alongside of that. And I grew up in central Wyoming my grandfather was a blacksmith and my father was a steel worker. So there was no such thing as mental illness or depression or anxiety. You just sucked it up and went back to work. So, and I lived like that for a long time. I never stopped working through all this stuff that started happening. It just caught up to me. So when I'm 40 years old, I'm zoning out for hours and hours in front of the TV, and I'm thinking this is just not me.
Yeah.
So some guys the guys that really loved me and cared about me came around me and they said, you're not healthy. And of course I flipped them off and told them it was their problem. And
how did they know you weren't healthy?
Well, it was pretty obvious.
Okay.
These were guys I worked with.
Yeah.
They knew me pretty well, and they knew that I didn't want to be that guy. But they could see me checking out. It was pretty obvious that I wasn't healthy, and I started getting unhealthy physically. And there were whole days when I'd just go and stare at the corner and just it was pretty palpable depression and anxiety stuff. And I just never knew that's what it was.
Right.
I heard about it.
Yeah.
Is really strange phobias that started to catch up with me and stuff. And it's weird for me to even talk about it because I just never, even now I think, man, was that really going on? But it's like, no, you're not supposed to be terrified driving across town.
Right.
Maybe in Anchorage.
Wow. So you would get just scared just for no reason?
Just driving. I mean, driving used to terrify me.
Wow.
Which in Anchorage might be an illegitimate fear.
Especially with snow. So.
But it was something I could feel, and then these periods of isolation and whatnot. And then there were two specific things that really were, I was able to look at myself and say, I'm just not healthy.
Yeah.
I don't like baseball very much. I watched 2 baseball games back to back without getting off the couch.
Wow.
There's something's going on with me. So I went down.
You just didn't want to deal with reality. That's what you're trying to do. You didn't want to deal with your feelings and how you were, or
that's a good question. I so wanted to matter where I was. I so wanted to be that guy that was a good dad,
yeah,
good husband, stand up guy at work.
right.
I legitimately want to be that guy.
Sure.
But I think for me, what caught up to me was working so hard the wrong way to be that guy, and not paying attention to what was really going on inside of me, because there were some unhealthy interactions that were going on in my life, and I just didn't have enough of myself to confront that and say, this is really scary. And knowing, a good friend of mine told me probably 6 or 7 years ago, so we don't often develop a strategy for what it looks like when it's time for us to leave a situation. And so I just grind because I didn't know, okay, this particular situation is not a thing that's good for me.
Yeah.
And so I just kept my foot to the floor.
Right.
And it was a real deep denial, but the inner conflict was, I wanted to be a good guy. I wanted to be a guy that really honored my wife and kids, and was a guy that could be depended on and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't work that way, especially if I'm not paying attention to what's going on inside of me.
You have to take care of yourself first.
Oh man, yeah. It's not just physical. It's an emotional thing. It's a spiritual thing. There's a lot of dimensions to it, which I didn't know. I was completely blind to all that. And so, I went to an inpatient treatment center for 2 months, and these guys started asking me questions like, "Hey, what's going on inside of you emotionally?" I could not tell you what was happening, and it never occurred to me that I didn't know what fear really felt like to me. It'd been so long since I'd actually made a distinction between just worrying about stuff and being afraid, being legitimately afraid of what was going on around me. It was completely lost to that. So,
we go to the gym and we work out physically. Yeah. The emotional health is just as important as the physical health, right?
It's the key to everything that's true about you and about me. So if a person cannot identify what's happening in themselves emotionally, they won't be able to tell you what's true about what they need, about what they really want, what they ache for, what they crave, what they dream about, what an ideal situation looks like relationally. It really is, the emotional thing is it's just a doorway to everything else that's true. So if I don't know what I'm feeling, I'm just going to offload that to some coping mechanism.
Well, I so admire your courage in talking about this, because most men, a lot of men, they don't want to even think about emotion. They don't even want to think about their emotional health. Like you say, coming from Wyoming.
Yeah.
Well, why? And we got to take a break, but when we come back, I'll ask you this. Why is it that men just seem to ignore the emotional health component of life? They don't even, I'll be fine. Just pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You'll be fine. And a lot of men walk around in horrific pain as a result of that.
Sure do.
Yeah. We'll continue with Lee Hudson talking about his journey to become the man that he is today. And it's very inspiring. Our number 569-1080. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show. We're streaming live on danfagan.us, broadcasting on KOAN 95.1 FM and 80 AM in Anchorage. Also KVNT 95.2 FM in Wasilla and 1020 AM in the Valley. Time currently 7:15. Not much. The thing about being a talk show host, you really don't work with people. Yeah. You usually have a producer, and that's it. So, and I had co-hosts, but I talked to Sharon Layhouse some. She was like the host for a while, but normally talk show hosts are in for 3 hours, they're gone.
Yeah.
So it's not like a work environment where you're there all day. And
what did you do on this?
This is it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the 3 hours and you spend the rest of the time
preparing, selling. I own this show.
Okay.
So everything that happens, I have to take it all. Scheduling gas, the whole deal.
I got
you. Yeah. Yeah.
You're selling ads too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it. Am I close enough?
7:16 in the morning. We're talking to Lee Hudson, who is has quite an interesting story, and a story that I think would inspire a lot of folks who probably are going through something very similar that you went through, Lee, and just discovering that it's not like there's more to life than just what you smell, touch, see, hear. We're emotional beings, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We feel.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong in admitting that.
No, that was one of the biggest misconceptions I had, because we're conditioned that way.
Yeah.
You alluded to that question earlier, that it's not okay for men to feel.
Yeah.
And so people tell me all the time in my work, hundreds of times in the course of 3 months, well, I'm just feeling emotional, or I'm not emotional today.
Yeah.
And the way I've learned that is to say, well, if I'm looking at you, I don't think about my eyeball working. It just does.
Yeah.
I don't think about when I'm listening to a sound, or probably even more appropriately, that my heart is beating, but I don't think about the reality of that thing doesn't work. I can't live.
Yeah.
And in much the same way, there's a biological thing that's going on sitting right on top of my brainstem that's feeling, and it's just doing what it's doing all the time.
Yeah.
And we're conditioned at a pretty young age to not feel, or at least try not to. So we put all these cognitive processes on top of that, that tell us not to feel. And what it sounds like is, stop crying or I'll give you a reason to cry, or suck it up and deal with it. Or, life is tough and then you die. Get over it. That kind of stuff.
Man up.
Man up. Oh man. And it's, and you got these wounded little kids running around that are in adult bodies, that have never reconciled that and learned how to feel and express out in the open, because we are feeling and express. We're just a culture of suppression and denial.
To me, there's nothing a man can do that's more courageous than make himself vulnerable to someone else and express his feelings. Because we're just not built that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's rare, but I like when you do, for you to just come on this broadcast and talk about the pain that you went through, that's courage, in my opinion, because men just don't do that.
Mm-mm.
Why is that? Pride?
It's
insecurity?
A lot of things. Most of it is long about, early childhood or whatnot. There's that we are culturally immersed with the people that are closest to us. The knock on therapy or counseling is that we're just blame our parents for everything.
Right.
Well, that's not always true, but it is the place where we grow up.
Right.
And we do have a spiritual, emotional, biological, physical connection to our biological parents. And so even if that's absent, that by virtue of its absence creates a wound.
Right.
And so we get wounded very young, and then we don't realize that the thing we do to put on top of that wound is exactly the opposite of what's necessary. That life is difficult. We get wounded. There are going to be days like this. It's hard, but I'm not going to leave you alone in that. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad about it, because you are,
So how did you, and you for those who are just joining us, talking to Lee Hudson, who is a counselor and works with other folks who experience emotional pain, but you went through a really tough time in your life.
Mm-hmm.
You came out of it though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're now in much better shape emotionally. What did you do? How did you get from point A to point B?
It started with a couple of guys being courageous enough to press through all that I did to fight them off, or fight them away. Because and these guys, they're not in the state. It kind of started with the guy I work with. I should back up on that. There's a gentleman that I work in tandem with. We have separate practices, but we see each other every day and we work together. We use the same model of counseling and whatnot. And I think he and one other guy locally kind of started that process to say, hey man, there's some stuff going on inside of you. And I bucked really hard at first.
Wow.
And called him a bunch of names. And
really? So you got really mad at him?
Oh, I was really angry because I was scared.
Okay.
And because I knew they were onto something, but I didn't want to look at that.
Right.
And so I got really afraid and raged all over them at first.
Yeah.
They stuck with me. And so and when I made a decision to go out of state, I'd actually talked to a clinical director at a men's treatment center in Tennessee. And that guy has a very similar background to me. We grew up a lot the same way and whatnot. He's a country boy, an Oklahoma truck driver, working with people and whatnot. And he said something about getting lost getting lost in a forest metaphorically as children, and their job really is to bring a guy out to the edge of that clearing so he can see himself.
Yeah.
And so I went down there, and it was several weeks before, first of all, I would believe that they weren't just trying to kill me.
Wow.
Because all that defense mechanism is there, and
So
they would just stick with me, and they could just say, just talk about what's going on inside of you, what's happening
and
inside
that
of
was
you.
hard.
Oh man, it's the hardest thing I ever did.
And you say it took several weeks?
It took, I think it was about 5 weeks in inpatient treatment center, working on it every single day and leaning into it before it finally started to realize that there's a difference between anxiety and worrying about things and being afraid.
Wow.
That's just one dimension of it. There's actually several
Now,
things.
what is the difference between anxiety and being afraid?
Anxiety is not a feeling. Most people don't know that.
It's not.
It's a defense mechanism. It's what we do to not feel afraid. So when your body's telling you that you're being threatened, it's actually trying to treat the emotion of fear. So when I feel threatened, it's one thing for me to say I'm afraid. It's another thing for me to say I'm going to come on this radio station and you're going to shame me, and so I'm going to have to have all this stuff in place so that I sound smart, look smart, and all that kind of stuff. But all of that is anxiety. It's not.
Yes.
It's defense.
Yes.
Rather than just saying that's a little bit scary to come on the radio. I don't know who's listening. I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know.
Right.
What,
Right.
I don't know how I'm going to sound or come off. Those fears are completely valid.
Sure.
But anxiety is what I put on top of my fear to not feel it.
Gotcha.
And they are light years apart.
Wow.
They're very, very different. And so it can conserve all of its energy into anxiety disorders, which is what was going on with me. I could feel it and just twisting up.
So once you began, we're talking to Lee Hudson, once you began to open your heart up to these guys and really be honest about what was going on inside of you, that's when the healing began?
Well, the first thing that happened was that it shocked me they didn't run away or tell me that I was crazy.
Okay.
So I needed that.
Yeah.
That was
because you had convinced yourself you were crazy.
Well, and the guy, and I'd worked with, been around unhealthy people.
Okay.
And when I did disclose a legitimate fear or whatever, and get into a situation where something's coming out of me, then it's, and this will be no surprise to most anybody listening, that the other person goes into their defense stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And you'd put me in my place or run away.
Right.
And so when we go through a whole lifetime of that, I didn't trust that these guys weren't going to tell me I was the problem and that I'm crazy and I'm stupid and I'm weak and all that other kind of stuff. I completely expected to hear that first.
Right.
So they had to gain my trust that they weren't going to leave. And the more I talked about how afraid I was, the closer they got. And that was a complete surprise to me. So the message in all of that is that nobody does this alone. They don't come out of it. I mean, there are 6 guys that it took to unwire all this stuff.
6 guys. Yeah. You know, that's another thing that I think men do. Not only not deal with emotional pain, we like to isolate.
Yes.
We like to build walls.
Yeah.
We don't want to let anybody in.
That's right. Because
we're afraid.
Yeah. We're going to get killed, or we're going to get left, or we're going to get exposed for who we are and shamed and all that kind of stuff.
That's why what you did is so courageous, because we're not built that way.
No.
So you went through that process.
Yeah.
You began to trust these guys.
Yeah.
And then could you feel yourself changing on the inside? Could you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't want to, my fears. This will sound like an advertisement or something, but there are certain anxiety symptoms that I've not experienced in 6 years.
Wow.
It's just once it dropped off of me, and I learned how to just say, okay, well, I'm in this situation, and my hands are sweating, and I'm scared, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's, and fear is a very good emotion to have when somebody swerves into your lane of traffic coming across town.
Yeah.
Fear is a gift.
Yeah.
Like, man, I'm afraid. My daughter took too much medication. I need to get her to the ER. Well, it's going to be fear that gets me there.
Yeah.
So there was some very specific physical things that dropped off of me over the course of that 2-month period. Yeah.
So that's stuff that dropped off, and you're a very different person now. You don't have those anxiety disorders anymore. How do you maintain that? It's not over yet, right? You got to do certain things to keep that going.
No, I think it's what I love about it, because one of the tangent gifts to being in inpatient treatment is I got to watch a bunch of guys do what I want to do.
Okay.
I really enjoy climbing into people's stuff with them.
Yeah.
I'd been doing it for a long time, just not to that level or that way. And so there are really 2 things that help me stay healthy. One of them is I've got friends that are close to me that I continually talk about, because life doesn't stop.
That's key.
And I've got plenty of triggers that are going to hit me all the time.
Sure.
And because we're very complicated beings on the inside,
Yes.
there are things that hit me different ways that I just never experienced before. So it's constantly processing out my own stuff in a healthy way with some other guys.
Now, let me interrupt you, because you can't just have just anybody.
No.
It's got to be people with the right heart, who are committed to you, that love you,
Yeah.
that are not going to get scared,
Yeah.
run themselves.
People that are aware of what's going on.
So how do you find people? Like, how do you find guys in your life that you could?
It takes time.
Yeah.
And I tell folks this all the time. What I tell them is, because they ask me, says, how do I find somebody I can talk to? I said, well, it's the person who will not take you away from your own feelings.
Yes.
And so if a person can get with somebody who can hear what's going on inside of them.
Yeah.
I really hate that this thing happened in my marriage or my work. My boss is a jerk or whatever.
Right.
And they can talk about that, and the other person won't say, well, it's going to be okay. Or, well, you don't have to be afraid, because, everything always works out in the end. Well, all that's defense. But if a guy can, especially for men, if another guy can hear that and just go, man, I've been there.
Yeah.
I'll be with you in that.
Yeah.
You want to keep talking about all of that?
Yeah.
Or this is what happened in my life. I totally support you in all of that. We're so not used to hearing that.
Right.
But those are the people who are safe.
And that's, you want to seek people like that out.
Yeah. And then the rule is it's the person who won't try to tell you not to feel. And they're well-meaning people. Really subtle way that we do that is, if somebody starts crying, we'll hand them a tissue. But that's not about that person who's crying. No. It's about me not being comfortable with your tears.
I was listening to a gal the other day who was speaking, and she said, go to the pain.
Yeah, go into it.
Go into it.
Yeah.
Don't fear it. Go straight toward it and deal with it. That's the way you become a better person. That's the way you get healing. That's the way. Yeah.
That was the hardest dimension of this whole process. I would sit and look at a list of feelings.
Yeah.
One of which was hurt.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see it.
Wow.
I don't know what I'm feeling. Yeah. I know I'm resenting like crazy, which means I'm probably hurting.
Yeah. And there's no shame in going to counseling to start.
No. In fact, we seek it out.
Yeah.
We're every human being that's walking around is seeking counsel.
Yeah. Yeah.
People who go to bars are seeking counsel.
Sure.
It's the truth.
It's very true.
Like, there's a lot of songs written about that.
That's right. So, that's right. Wow.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of what we don't seek often is healthy relationships where it's okay for us to feel out loud.
Well, that's great, Lee. I'm so impressed that you had the courage to fight through that. And I know as a result of your courage, you're going to be helping and are helping many other people.
Yeah. It's very rewarding work. I don't know that fun is the right word. But
no. It's
very rewarding. And I love walking with people in it.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And you didn't know I was going to do this, but do you want to give out your number so people need counseling, they can come see you?
Sure.
Okay.
952-5564.
952-5564.
That's right. And it's real simple. I don't have any administration or anything. I'm on my own. So people just call and they'll say, heard about you once. I'd love to come and talk about some stuff.
Just talk. Yep. That's all you got to do is talk. 952
5564.
5564. Lee Hudson, it was a real pleasure. Thanks so much. Great seeing you again.
Yeah, you too, man.
7:30, Dan Fagan Show. We'll go to let's talk about it. Okay. Definitely.
I'll wait on a phone call.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna call you next week, early next week.
Okay, man.
Thanks so much.
Oh, you bet.
Great seeing you, man. All right. Hey, Brian. 7:35 here on the Friday edition of the Dan Fagan Radio Show. It is the 6th of February. And good morning to you. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Welcome to the broadcast. Alexandra Gutierrez, who is with the Alaska Public Media. She's a reporter down in Juneau. Alexandra, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Dan.
It's my pleasure, and I will tell you, I have probably had, I don't know. Amanda Coyne was the first one who told me about you, and she said you're the best reporter in the state. I've had legislators compliment you. I've had other reporters, and I don't really follow Alaska Public Media, but I need to start because I'm told you're just a superstar down there, really doing a great job of covering the legislature.
Well, you got your own radio program. You don't need to listen to us.
Well,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You should.
Yeah. Do you enjoyed covering the legislature?
I do. I enjoy it a lot. It's definitely. I think it's more Veep and slapstick at times.
Yes.
I mean, people are just really. I think that people tend to think that, all of this like backdoor dealing is happening, and but from both sides. But I think a lot of the stuff that happens here that makes people upset is just, I don't know. It's people being human. People make mistakes. People are. You can't anticipate every need. You can't make everyone happy, and it's a pretty small body. It's only 60 legislators, so
right.
You don't have to go through, spokesperson after spokesperson to actually talk to the people who are making policy, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, you're very close to the action. I covered the legislature for 1 year when I worked for Channel 2. It was like 12 years ago or so, and I enjoyed it. It made me such a better reporter to actually get in there and see how the sausage is made and watch it all firsthand. I think it's something that every journalist should try to do at least once, cover the legislature in their state. Don't you find that you're so much more knowledgeable about the state of Alaska covering the legislature?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I technically have a beat, which is state politics, but that beat basically includes everything. It includes energy policy, it includes fiscal policy, it includes everything from, marijuana and fisheries to, I don't know, Arctic policy to whatever. So anything that could have policy made around it falls into kind of my wheelhouse, which it can be exhausting sometimes, but also really, there's always something new to learn.
Well, don't tell anybody, but I spend a ridiculous amount of time during my day a lot watching this, Gavel to Gavel North 360 channel, because I'm fascinated by these committee meetings, and I can't believe how many of the work, at least what they're showing on this channel, is geared toward pot this session. It seems like that's all they're talking about down there.
Yeah, it's sort of funny. Part of the reason that there have been so many pot hearings is because there's a deadline of February 24th for the initiative.
Okay. On
February 24th, you can, right now you can possess a small amount of marijuana inside of your home, half a dozen plants. But starting on February 24th, you'll be able to possess it outside of the home. And there's a pretty, defined timeline for the legislature to weigh in, for municipalities to weigh in, for either the, Alcoholic Beverage Control Board or a separate marijuana control board that the legislature could potentially create to establish regulation for retailers. So there's kind of a time pressure to deal with it fast.
Yeah.
And, it's also kind of, I don't know, I'm trying to pick the right word here, but it's something that gets people interested in politics. People love reading about marijuana. Legislators, in some ways, love talking about marijuana if it means they're going to be on TV a bunch.
Right.
And the mood here, in some ways, is so bleak compared to the past couple of sessions, with the budget deficit being as large as it is.
Yes.
In some ways, it's kind of fun and interesting and novel, and gives people who aren't on Binance maybe something to do.
How many years have you covered the session?
So this is my third session.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine, my goodness, under ACES, we were rolling into cash, and now all of a sudden it would take it's just a different thing now. There's no money.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my first week of this session, walking into one senator's office who has a blackboard where he would put the daily price of oil on it. And I walked in, and this is right before session's gavelled in. So they have the price of oil for April 17th, 2014 there.
Wow.
And it's $110.
Wow.
And now we're at half of that amount. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, we were sweet summer children. We had no idea how good we had it.
Well, sure. Yeah. And I'm sure it's so much harder for some of these legislators to keep their constituents happy that want, money for their pet projects now that they've got nothing to offer. It's kind of like going on vacation with no cash.
Yeah.
You don't get it's no fun.
Yeah.
Sit in the room.
Yeah. I mean, it's, there have been jokes with the co-chairs of the finance committee who are dealing with the capital budget, to just, put up a poster board that says go and call it a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how many capital budget requests are made this year, because everyone knows that it's slim pickings. In some ways, it seems like a lot of people who might normally be in Juneau are just trying to stay out of the way, because in some ways, bringing attention to yourself might not help.
We're talking to Alexandra Gutierrez, who is Juneau reporter, state affairs reporter for Alaska Public Media. We keep hearing this bad blood between Walker and Chenault and the Republican leadership in the Walker administration. How's that playing out? Is it exaggerated, or is it real?
I think it's nuanced. They have a long-standing history, because both are, Bill Walker is from Valdez. The speaker, Mike Chenault, is from Nikiski. Both have advocated for a gas line to end in their respective communities. They're no longer part of the same party. They're two of the most powerful people in the state, with the governor being the most powerful. And yeah, it's not unreasonable to expect there to be a tension between the two of them. They disagree on a number of fundamental issues, but
you've got the governor's chief of staff, Jim Whitaker, writing a pretty scathing editorial about Chenault and Hawker and I think Kevin Meyer. That can't help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're seeing letters come from the speaker's office now,
right,
kind of on a weekly basis on different policy issues. There was one encouraging the governor to. This was from both chambers, but one encouraging the governor to put a hiring freeze and stop spending, and then we saw a freeze on all of these mega projects in response, and then we saw a little bit of drama concerning the process behind the Fish and Game Commissioner,
yes,
which is it's you need probably 20 minutes to explain all of the drama and intrigue and personality conflict over that.
Right.
And now, last week we had the speaker send a letter to the governor asking him to drop the Point Thompson lawsuit. And to all of these letters, we've kind of seen a reaction in response, but I don't know if it's necessarily the one that the speaker wants. So,
yeah. The Grace Jang came out and said that the governor is going to drop that lawsuit, but it's not because of the letters. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's earlier this week, I was reporting a story on the letter and the fact that there'd been a request for an extension in the lawsuit, and the governor was traveling, so he wasn't available. But we got a statement saying, this is illegal. It's been illegal. We're not in an immediate hurry. And then yesterday at a press conference, he said that no, it's my plan all along to drop this.
We're talking to Alexandria Gutierrez with Alaska Public Media. There's some questions that I'm unclear about on where the governor stands. I'm going to put you in the uncomfortable position of maybe answering them, because I know you cover him closely. I'll ask you that when we come back. Alexandria Gutierrez is our guest. She covers the legislature 7:45, Dan Fagan Show. All right, 7:46, Dan Fagan Show on this Friday, the 6th of February. We're talking with Alexandria Gutierrez, who's a reporter down in Juneau, highly acclaimed and highly regarded reporter, Alaska Public Media, that's public radio?
It is public radio.
Your new name, though. You didn't used to be that, right?
Yes, we used to be APRN, the Alaska Public Radio Network, and about a year or so ago, because we also have a public television outfit, went under a shorter name.
Yeah. Now, you took over for Dave Donaldson?
I did.
Now, he's an institution, huh?
He was. It was definitely a big, it was pretty intimidating taking the job after someone who's been in it for over 20 years. But
he was such a help to me when I was down there covering. He just knew everything and everybody, and
he continues to be a help to me. He's just a really amazing guy, and I'm a big fan of him. Very fond of him.
What's he doing in his retirement? Just taking it easy?
A little bit, yeah. He's taking it easy. I'll see him around Juneau, every so often. He's still watching, but he is. He's been doing it a long time, and I think that he probably 20 years is more. 20 plus years is more than enough, I think, for anyone. There aren't too many legislators who make it that long.
That's true. Tell him I said hi when you see him, if you don't mind.
I will.
Now, tell me a little bit about yourself. You're where are you from?
So I grew up in Texas.
What part?
In Houston. So
okay.
And
I used to report. I worked for a TV station in Beaumont.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not too far.
When were you out there?
Oh, forever. You probably weren't even born. It was 1990.
Okay. I was, a kid then.
Yeah.
So I grew up there. And, when I talk to my friends out there about, why'd you move up to Alaska? I get their go by telling them I just wanted to move someplace bigger. But I came up here about 5 years ago. I lived out in Dutch Harbor for a couple of years.
What brought you here?
So I was working for a magazine out in DC, kind of shortly after in the midst of the financial crisis, shortly after Lehman Brothers went under.
No.
And it wasn't the greatest scene to be in. And I was in DC at the time, and everyone was leaving the magazine, met up with someone who had worked out at the public radio station out in the Aleutian Islands. And he just started talking about all of these really incredible things that he had covered while out there, and it sounded more interesting than covering.
Wow! So you went to the seat of power to Dutch Harbor, Alaska.
I know it sounds crazy, but think of how Congress has operated over the past few years.
Yeah,
it's in some way, for my friends who are still out there and covering it, I hear them complain about how it's some of the most boring coverage you can do because nothing is actually happening.
Yeah, it's just deadlock.
With that amount of gridlock, you're not covering, every bill that you cover, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
You're just kind of covering the drama of people getting angry about it.
So how long were you in Dutch Harbor?
I was there from 2010 to the end of 2012.
Yeah.
So,
How was it? Be,
I
be
really,
honest. Come on now.
I know, I love it.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I really did. It's a beautiful place. It's a really neat community. The fishing industry is actually a lot of fun for, if you're talking about how every young reporter should cover the legislature. Well, I think fish politics are actually a really fun place to come up to. I mean, there's so many business stories, political stories, and occasionally adventure stories. There's a reason that, WS Catch has been popular as it has been in the lower 48. And yeah, it's a lot of really fun characters and complicated drama. So I don't think that I could have lived there for the rest of my life. I kind of had to make the choice of,
goodness.
okay, I've been here for 3 years, and it's a great community. Do I want to be part of it from here on out, or am I going to do something else? And it is remote, and if you have family that is not there, it can be a little bit challenging. But if you get a weather window, I would encourage people to travel out there.
Yeah,
it's a risk, but it's worth going.
Alexandria Gutierrez is our guest. She's a reporter for the Alaska Public Media, and now there's some things that I've not talked to the governor since he's been elected. Of course, I've interviewed him dozens of times in the past, but I have a couple of questions that I'm not sure where he is, and I'd like to ask you, because I'm assuming you might know because you have more access to him.
Well, I'll tell you what I know.
Well, let me ask you specifically. Yeah, specifically, well, I moderated a debate between Mr. Walker and Mr. Parnell the Friday before the election out in the Valley, and I asked him about this notion of the state owning 52% of the pipeline. And he was dead set on, yes, I'm committed to it. I'm not going to change my mind. It's yes. And then I asked Governor Parnell, I said, Governor Parnell, how could Mr. Walker get that? And Mr. Parnell said he'd have to start from scratch. And then Mr. Walker said, no, that's not true. And that was kind of the dialogue there. I have yet to hear any clear position on his part now since he's been elected, or if he's still going to insist on that 52% state ownership. What's your understanding of his position on that now?
Well, you're right. He hasn't really talked about majority ownership in that context. Since being elected, he has said that he really wants to see a large diameter pipeline. He is less than enthralled with the concept of a smaller diameter pipeline, which, funny enough, the state would control. So it actually does meet the majority requirement.
Right.
But there's campaigning and then there's governing, and especially given the current fiscal climate where we're on track to burn through our reserves.
Right.
It's hard to see how the state can pony up the amount of money that would be required for majority ownership in a large diameter pipeline, even if the big three were game to let that happen, which, from talking to most observers of this project and the players involved, they're not really too into that concept.
The idea of the state controlling it.
Yes.
Yeah. So is it, if you were to pick one of the options, you would, at this point, it's your belief that the governor has backed off on the 52%?
I can tell you what I see, and I haven't seen him say that number since.
I've noticed that, and that's what's confused me, because it seems to me, Alexandria, we're talking to Alexandria Gutierrez, a reporter for Alaska Public Media covering Juneau. His whole life has been dedicated to this notion of the Norway model, the owner state, having the state. Wally Hickel was once on my talk show on KFQD, and he told me, he said, the biggest mistake the state of Alaska ever made was not owning and controlling the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. And it seems like that mentality is what Mr. Walker has always operated under. And for now that he's elected, for him to just abandon that, it just, I don't know. It seems confusing to me. And I understand what you're saying. He's not talking about it anymore. So it may be that he's abandoned that. Maybe he's faced the reality of it now that he's governor, that the producers won't go along with it. But it would be a pretty big change of heart if he were to drop the state controlling everything.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely, I wouldn't run for governor. Let's just say
not a good time to be governor. No.
Yeah. No. And I think that it's a lot easier to talk about things like that when the state has money. And right now, there isn't a piece of gas line legislation before the legislature right now. The timeline for that is a special session in the fall where terms are established. But he's also coming in to a situation. He's a governor. He has a lot of power, but he's not king of Alaska.
No.
The policies he wants to get through still have to go through the legislature, and the bill they passed last year to get a gas line project on track sets out pretty specific terms for what portion the state owns. And even if he personally wants majority ownership, it might not be the best battle to pick at this time, given the composition of the legislature and the current status of state funds.
Yeah. I'm a Twitter follower of yours.
Oh, yeah?
And I just love this. What is it? A tweet?
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Landfield.
Oh, my gosh.
Now he's going to be this will be a little inside baseball, but we'll explain it to people. Jeff Landfield, is he up to be on the Judicial Council?
Not the Judicial Council. So I think the tweet that you're referring to, I made a comment yesterday about so who's bringing popcorn to Jeff Landfield's confirmation hearing for the Judicial Conduct Commission.
Oh, Judicial Conduct Commission.
Yes.
So that he's up to on that commission. He's been nominated or appointed.
He has been nominated. His appointment will have to go through the legislature.
Now, Landfield, most may know, may not, ran against McGuire.
Exactly.
And pretty tough race. I mean, he wasn't very kind to her. And she's going to be on the committee that will approve his nomination?
She is the chair of the committee that will elect him.
Oh, my goodness. Do you think she'll come after him? Do you think there'll be some drama there?
We'll see. It might turn out to be nothing. I guess it depends on what sort of mood everyone is in. But I do think that given their history to get running against each other, and for lack of a better term, some drama between them, it does have the potential to be one of the more interesting confirmation hearings of this session.
When is it?
The meeting hasn't been scheduled yet, but it'll be worth watching for when it does come on the calendar.
Well, I hope you'll tweet out when it is so we can all watch it.
Yeah, I actually ended up speaking with Jeff yesterday, and it's unclear whether he'll come in person or he'll testify over the phone. But I think that no matter what, it'll be interesting to see how they interact with each other, given the prior campaign history between them.
Alexandria Gutierrez with Alaska Public Media. A real pleasure talking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alexandria. Appreciate that. Dan Fagan Show, it's 7:59. All right, welcome back, Dan Fagan Show. 6 minutes past 8 o'clock. Here it is, Friday. How about that Friday, February 6th? It's Friday. Our number 569-1080. Mike Daniels, he's the head of Country Financial here in Alaska, where they have 13 locations, 5 in Anchorage, 5 in the Valley. Country representatives are so well trained and knowledgeable and up on the very latest information when it comes to help you invest your dollar wisely, prepare yourself for a worry-free retirement. Go see Mike Daniels and his team. You'll sit down with them, and you will be dazzled by the knowledge and wisdom they have when it comes to financial matters. You're really not going to believe the stuff they can tell you that's going to just blow you away. They're so good at what they do. You work so hard. You play by the rules. You do everything you can to build a nest egg for yourself when you retire, to build a nest egg for your offspring when you pass away. Why not get the very best advice and assistance in that goal? Country Financial, make an appointment. You'll be thrilled you did. 866 Country. 866 Country. Country Financial. You know, the bald eagle is, if you lived in the lower 48, as I did for many years, you look at the bald eagle as this glorious, gorgeous, mystical creature. And it is. It's a beautiful bird. And I've seen many a bald eagle. I've seen them on golf courses. I've seen them float in the Kenai. I've seen them all over. When I lived in Juneau, covered the legislature, you see a lot of them there. But I remember when I was coming back from the legislature, I was driving back going through Haines, and there were, 30 of them just picking and pecking away at some dumpster. And it was not a pretty sight. It was basically bald eagles scavenging, and they are scavengers, trash. And I thought, well, this is not a good portrayal of the bald eagle. And it reminds me of what I think the media is all about. In many ways, the media, they're just out for blood. And a perfect example is what's happening with Brian Williams. The New York Post has a big full page front page. Lion Brian, war scandal engulfs NBC. His Iraq pilot shoots down tail. A nose for news. And of course, the picture is Brian Williams has this big, long Pinocchio nose. Now even Tom Brokaw, longtime anchor, his predecessor, is calling for Brian Williams to step down. The pilot, all that hit us was dust. The problem is his apology, they're now saying, is also a lie. That some of the things in his apology and the way that he's trying to get out of this are not true. So there's just this storm. And now they're beginning to look at some of the things that he said during Katrina, which are questionable. And they're not, NBC News anchor Brian Williams comments about dead bodies, Hurricane Katrina starting to gain attention, drawing scrutiny in light of Williams' recent lie about his time over in Iraq. So it's a media frenzy. All the networks, of course, I don't know I would doubt NBC's doing it, but they're just going after the guy. It's blood in the water. Let's do it. Let's go after him. And it's the old adage. The cover-up's always worse than the sin. When you don't come 100% clean and take credit for what you did wrong and own it, then the media will go after you with everything they have. If Brian Williams would have come out and said, yes, I lied, I'm ashamed of it, I wanted people to think of me in a better light and think that I was heroic by going into these tough situations with the troops, I shouldn't have done it. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. If he had done that, there'd be no place for the media to go. But his half-hearted, I misremembered. Come on. You misremembered whether or not you were shot down. It was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous apology. He really never did totally apologize. And then he even said, in my attempt to honor our troops, he wasn't honoring the troops. He was honoring himself. He was making himself look good. So that not coming clean, I'm telling you, as a former reporter, that's when you go into frenzy mode. When the politician, when the official, when the journalist, when whoever it is, does not own the mistake, then it opens the door for the media to come after you with everything they have. There's just something, and it's just good for the soul, isn't it? It's just good for the soul to say, man, I screwed up big time. I am so sorry. I hated that I did that. I don't know why I did it. It's a character flaw, and I'm going to try my very best to do better next time. Please, please forgive me. That's the kind of thing that not only cleanses your soul, it shuts down the frenzy around you. It shuts down the sharks smelling blood in the water. And now it's just getting worse. And there, I 24 hours ago, I thought, well, Brad Williams makes NBC a lot of money. He is the number one rated anchor. So you're talking about a guy that they've invested a lot into. And for NBC to just cut him loose, that's going to cost him dearly. So 24 hours ago, I thought there's no way he'd get fired. It'll get swept under the rug. But now, when they're looking at the apology, and I think he said that we were ahead of the chopper, but then they were actually behind them like by an hour, so that wasn't true. This is the apology now. So I actually think, and especially with Tom Brokaw coming out and saying that they should fire Williams, I think he's probably done. And to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, when you are a journalist, when you're an anchor, you have to have credibility. People have to know that what you're saying is trustworthy. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get everything perfectly right, but you have to be committed to reporting what you know is true. Because so much of journalism is he said, she said. You go out and you interview people, and a lot of times you talk to people off the record and they trust you. And then if you report something and they question what you say, they said, I didn't say that. Well, then your credibility is all you have. And frankly, the fact that Mr. Williams had told this story so many times, and it wasn't true. He knew it wasn't true. And then even the apology was a whitewashing, and he didn't own the fact that he lied to us multiple times. That really, in my opinion, disqualifies him, certainly from being a main anchor, and also being a journalist, in my opinion. That's my opinion. 8:14, Dan Fagan Show. All right, 8:16, Dan Fagan Show. 569-1080, 569-1080. High wind warning today. Heavy winds out in the valley, up to 80-mile-an-hour winds. And in Anchorage, it'll be not quite that strong, but yet we will have some pretty strong winds. A little bit warmer today. Girdwood, 10 degrees. Eagle River, 19. Palmer, 18. Wasilla, 18. Anchorage, 21. Happy to welcome to the broadcast an old friend, Lee Hudson. Lee, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan.
Lee is you're a counselor?
Yes, sir.
Working with?
I am actually in private practice.
Private practice.
I partner loosely with Cornerstone Health Associates. I did all my internship work there and still partner. We refer back and forth with them, but I am in private practice. I work alongside of another guy, but I'm on my own.
You got a great radio voice.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah. Of course, they tell me I have a great face for radio.
I got to touch that.
Yeah. There you go. Well, I was very very moved by something you posted on Facebook. And a lot of men walk around in horrific pain as a result of that.
Sure do.
That's a conversation we had with Lee Hudson earlier this morning in the broadcast, and I wanted to play that for you again. Let you hear that. 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number if you'd like to be a part of the broadcast. Email me, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Well, U.S. gained strong 257,000 jobs, pay jumps. U.S. employers added a vigorous 257,000 jobs in January, and wages jumped by the most in 6 years, evidence that the job market is accelerating closer to full health. This is according to the Associated Press. The surprisingly robust report the government issued Friday also showed that hiring was far stronger in November and December than it had previously estimated. Employees added 414,000 jobs in November, the most in 17 years. Job growth in December was revised sharply up to 329,000, which is good. Things are picking up. Average hourly wages soared 12 cents in January to $24.75, sharpest gain since 2008. Stock market only up 38 points as of this morning. But things are picking up. There's just no doubt about it. Here's what Russell Price, senior economist at the financial services firm Ameriprise, says. He says, for the average American, it's certainly good news. 2015 is going to be the year of the American consumer. With job growth being strong, we're going to see a pickup in wages and salaries. Well, that's good news. You know, I'm very optimistic about the future of this country. I'm not burying my head in the sand. I'm not ignoring the problems, but I am optimistic. Things are picking up, and I think we're going to see some good days ahead. 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number if you want to be on the broadcast. Let's go to John. John, good morning.
Good morning, Dan. I just heard your clip on the gentleman there talking about emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
With men. I think a good question to ask is what percentage of those men have some form of spirituality in their lives? You know, whether they're a believer, non-believers, and look at the percentages. You know, I know the macho component comes into play.
Yeah.
But I noticed that a lot of men that I know that have spirituality in their lives, they're more confident to address an issue, whether it be a neurological, psychological, emotional type issue. The guys that I know that are pretty strong spiritually are also strong enough to say, maybe I need to get some help or seek out some professional guidance.
Well, Lee, I'm sorry, John, I agree with you. You know, the silent, strong type is what our culture teaches us is what real manhood's about. I just disagree. I think that's frankly almost cowardly. It takes great strength and courage to say, especially a man, hey, man, I need some help. I either need some help from my fellow man, I need help from God, I need help. That is such a tough thing for man to do. And to sit there and build walls around yourself and become an island and act like you're tough and not say anything, frankly, that's cowardly.
Well, a lot of guys look at that as a weakness if you're seeking help. And in reality, the men that I know that are, some of them are just regular guys, and some of them are powerful men in big positions that have that spirituality in their heart, in their minds. And, they seek guidance, whether it be from, kneeling down in prayer or professional guidance amongst their peers with regards to other types of problems.
Yes.
So it's funny to see that from men that you're like, wow, this guy. A lot of guys wouldn't do
Yep.
They wouldn't show their emotion in this way.
I agree. I was very, very courageous. Thank you, John.
You're welcome, Dan. Thank you.
Yep, appreciate your phone call. 569-1080, 569-1080. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show, KOAN, KVNT. Was it fighting outside? Tired? You get to sleep all during the day? You're proud of me. You think he's making a killing on that? You think he's making a killing on that? Yeah. All right, 8:35, Dan Fagan Show. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number. If you want to give us a call and be a part of the broadcast. Big event going on tonight in the Valley. I think it's the Lincoln Day dinner. And our good friend Legal Eagle Beagle was supposed to call in and tell us about it. I just called him and said, call in and tell us about it. He said, okay, I will. And I don't know where he is. I'm calling him now. See what the deal be. No, he's not answering. You calling in? Oh, okay. Well, we're waiting for you. All right. Call us up. Thanks. All right. There you go. That Beagle, man, he's a smart dude. One smart cookie. He pisses me off because he just never makes a mistake. He never does anything wrong. I hate that. I make so many mistakes. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. So you're speaking at the big Lincoln dinner. Is it Lincoln dinner?
Yeah. Matt Sear Republican Women's Club out at Evangelos. Things get started about 5 o'clock, and then we get started around 6 with dinner.
Is it a women-only crowd, or do they allow men?
I think you have to be accompanied by a woman. Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Seriously?
No, I'm just kidding.
Because I don't know any women, so that would be a problem for me.
Yeah, well, I think they would welcome with open arms anybody who to come.
I'll bet you. I would love to hear your speech. I bet it's really good. What are you going to talk about tonight?
The speech I call the Golden Age of Conservatism.
Oh, you're going to start with Goldwater, or how's that going to work?
No, I'm starting with today.
The Golden Age. We're in the Golden Age.
We are entering it. Yes, we are.
Interesting. Because I was listening to Laura Ingraham today, or as you say, Laura Ingraham, and she was talking about, really the birth of the conservative movement was with Goldwater back in '64, and it was the first time that the conservatives won control of the Republican Party from the establishment. And of course we lost the general, and then we got Nixon in there, and he wasn't much a conservative, and then when Reagan came, that was our vindication. And she was talking about how that Reagan, his 8 years was that was the real the glory days of our movement. And she said one of the things that's different now than was when Reagan was in office is that we had a common enemy, which was communism. But I think we pretty much got a common enemy now, which I think is leftism. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Well, in large ways, because so much damage has been done to the family, and so many people have been convinced that the government is their provider, either their parent or the person that gives them food. I mean, we have kids who go to school get 3 meals a day from school.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's just a lot of confusion going on out there, and I think for a whole new generation of people, they don't really recognize government for what it is. Oh, okay. So anyway, that's what I think is going on, and it's a difficult situation, particularly for people who are looking for limited government. But in Alaska, we're headed into a new era, an era where we will be paying for everything the government does.
Yeah.
And that is new. We have not had to pay.
Right.
We have not had to make hard decisions and hard choices. It hasn't been either the businessman or the job, or the welfare benefit.
Yeah.
But that is going to be the way that it is coming up. Even schools will have to change. We just can't afford to keep paying $2 billion for schools. We can't.
No.
It's not possible.
Right.
So there are huge changes coming up, and that's really where we are right now.
So
anyway,
so tonight you're talking about the golden age. Is it the golden age of conservatism?
Yeah, the golden age of conservatism is what I call it.
And you're anticipating some big victories for the conservative movement in years to come.
Big opportunities.
Opportunities. Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Victories come with great vision and good leadership, and then oftentimes humility.
Mm.
So I don't know that we have those things right now, but we could have them. I think we've got a lot of potentially good leaders, and so we just have to find out how to work together and come up with sort of a new agey kind of version of, well, what does liberty look like today? What kind of a free society can we sustain, given how much damage is being done to educating kids or miseducating them?
Well, it's given me great hope, Glenn, is something I just learned or was reminded of, that, Ronald Reagan, after his first term, clearly made such a distinctive difference in this country. Morning in America again, and probably the most successful first term of any president in history. Took over after Jimmy Carter and Malaise. Did you know that Ronald Reagan, running against Walter Mondale, just a sorry candidate, Ronald Reagan still, 39% of the people in this country who voted for Mondale. 39%. And I'm thinking about that. These people are obviously just nuts. And it reminds me that, okay, that's the left. That's the people, and maybe they're not the left. Maybe they're just people who've been told you always have to vote Democrats because Republicans are evil. But that's really the threshold, I think, that still exists today. I think there's about 40% of Americans that they're just going to vote Democrat. It doesn't matter what happens in this nation. The consequences of the leaders' decisions are irrelevant. So that's the threshold. And it's that middle ground that's still up for grabs. And so I don't know that much has changed. If such a clear, victorious presidency still loses 39% of the country back in 1984, I think we're still there. I think we're still in the 40% are going to they don't care. They're going to vote for the Democrat. And then that middle ground is where the battleground is.
Well, I think the battleground is more and more generational.
Yeah. What percentage of let me give you these numbers. Ronald Reagan won 54% of the vote. You know what percent of the vote he won 25 and under?
No.
65.
Wow.
He totally penetrated the age barrier when it came from Republicans. It was his ideology. It was his commitment to be good, commitment to his ideals that young people gravitated to. And this idea that young people only vote left now, I just don't buy that, because I think if that's why they love Ron Paul. If you're a guy conviction, they gravitate to you, I think.
Well, there's a new kind of conservative foundation rising, and it comes from knowing that the government's giving a lot of things to a lot of people, but it's taking a lot of opportunity from them.
Yes.
In order to do that.
Young people you talk about.
Yeah, and they're just not going to put up with it. So, there's a language that has to be used, and there is a set of ideas that have to be given. Hey, Dan, I can't stay any longer. I just want to make sure I invite everybody to Evangelos tonight. Starts around 5, and I'm really looking forward to
and you're the keynote speaker.
That's me.
That's right. And Glenn Beagle, of course, every day, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. right here on KOAN. Glenn, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, good luck tonight. Yeah, I would imagine. I've never heard Glenn speak, but I would imagine he would be an excellent speaker, because he's a pretty smart dude. That's Evangelos tonight. 5 o'clock, I guess the mingling, and then 6 o'clock, they serve you your grub. 569-1080, 569-1080. It's the 6th of February, Friday. How about that? You made it to Friday. Congratulations. High wind warning for a good bit of South Central, especially out in the valley today. And also here in South Central. Highs in the mid-20s today. Sunshine. 8:44. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show. Well, it's 8:46, winding up the week here on the Dan Fagan Show, February 6th, 2015. You know, I'm a huge, I just love golf. I can't tell you. I cannot tell you how excited I get when I wake up in the morning and I know I'm heading out to the golf course. And it's just one of the things in life that I just can't get enough of. And it was so heartbreaking to see the highlights of Tiger Woods. He's played in the tournament, what was it, the Farmers Insurance Open. And typically a professional golf tournament, you'll have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You have to make the cut. You have to shoot a low enough round Thursday and Friday to make the cut to play on the weekend. And Tiger, yesterday, which is the first day of the 4-day tournament, he played so badly, he just walked off the course. Played 11 holes. I think I could beat Tiger Woods right now. He's that bad. The guy is just lost his game. And we're talking about the greatest golfer of all time. What he accomplished in his career. And if you're not a golf fan, you don't understand golf, it's hard to comprehend just how dominating he was in this sport. And to watch him go out there and frankly play like me, you know, it's just amazing. And I think the lesson in this is that, you know, 250 years from now, nobody's going to know who Tiger Woods is. And when you do things in life that are that draw attention to yourself and bring you notoriety, that's all well and good, but that's just going to fade away like dust. It really is. And when you do things in your life and the things that you accomplish in your life have eternal consequences to them, that's really what matters. When you help other people, when you live your life in a way that you literally benefit other people and help them live a better life and have them spread their wisdom to other people because you spread your wisdom to them. And just that eternal, you know, there's two streams, it seems to me, in life. One, that you can accomplish something, but it'll fade away. Or you can accomplish something that literally will last for all eternity. And it's the things that last for eternity that I think are the ones that few people realize how important they are. Having a child and raising that child correctly, whether that child goes out and raises another child and then passes the values you passed on to that child, and then it keeps going throughout all eternity. These are the kind of things I'm talking about. Just living your life in a way where that the neighbors who know you, your friends who know you, you affect the way they live their lives for the positive. These are eternal consequences to living life because they get passed on. When I look at my dad and what a great man he was and how much he taught me and how I'm so much better of a person now because of the things I've learned from him, that'll hopefully get passed on. And it's an eternal thing. And no, 250 years from now, no one will remember my dad. But what he passed on to me and what I pass on to other people and what other people pass on to those people, and it keeps living, it keeps alive, it's eternal. And when we focus on just the temporal and, you know, making a name for ourselves or trying to, you know, build our own little kingdom where people are excited about us in the now, that's good, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the real heroes are people who are accomplishing things that will truly last forever. And that was the thought I had when I watched Tiger Woods fall apart on the golf course. His glory days are over. His body, you know, he had such a violent swing. It just tore up his body. And he's had so many surgeries. He's so athletic, but his swing was so aggressive and so violent that through the years it just began to tear his body down. And now he can, you could see him wince when he'd swing. Even just walking, he was having trouble. So there's nothing wrong with that. He gave it all on the course. That's a wonderful thing. I'm not trying to minimize what Mr. Woods accomplished. But what's really important in Tiger Woods' life is what did he pass on to his kids, his friends, his neighbors in the way of values and wisdom. And those are the things that will be long lasting, much more than his dominance of golf for 20 years. And that's to me, that's a big distinction. So you don't have to feel sorry for the guy. It was tough for me to watch because he's been such a hero of mine just on the course. Hero in the sense that he can really play golf. And if you've ever played golf, you've got to take everything you have on the court. You can't leave anything at home when you go play golf. You've got to, it takes 100% of your focus, your mental capacity, your physical capacity. You just got to sell out to the game. And when you do, you can do great things. And that's the beauty of golf. It takes everything. 569-1080, 569-1080. Brian Williams, poor Brian. Lion Williams, they call him. The piranha media is out to get him. Even Tom Burrow called today saying that Williams should resign. The pilot that was flying the plane that Williams was on said all that hit us was dust. Where now NBC News bosses are considering hanging him out to dry. Even Brian Williams' apology is being challenged. There was untruth in his apology. They're even looking back at some of the unusual claims Mr. Williams made during Katrina. So the guy's in trouble. They're after him. They're out to get him. Man, can you imagine being in his position? Number one anchor, most watched anchor, longest running anchor, and literally overnight, the entire media industrial complex is out to get him. And it is a feeding frenzy. I was flipping channels last night. CNN was attacking him. O'Reilly Factor was attacking him. Everybody's CBS News. They're all going after him. And as I said earlier in the broadcast, the thing that the media loves is the cover-up. They love the cover-up. And you can mess up. But if you own it and come clean, the media will have to leave you alone because there's nothing left to report. But if you leave the media an open door by not owning your mistake and by trying to whitewash it or minimize it, using words like I misremembered, is just putting blood in the water for the sharks of the media. And Mr. Williams should have known that. If he would have come out and said, I lied, I'm embarrassed, I'm sorry, I have obviously made a major mistake, please forgive me, please trust me again, I will not do it again, the media would have nowhere to go. But then he comes out with this half-hearted apology that even in and of itself contains things that aren't true. Well, the media is just going to, that's just, we're going after that. That was what Sarah Palin never got. With the Trooper Gate and all that nonsense. If she'd just come clean, I tried to get my brother-in-law fired because he was a creep and he hit my sister and I didn't like it, or he treated my sister poorly, the media would have had nowhere to go. That's how you shut down a scandal. That's how you shut down the media feeding frenzy, is you own your mistakes. And Mr. Williams is learning that the hard way. And I kind of feel for him, to be honest with you. I kind of feel for him. I'm not justifying. And I do believe he should resign. I agree with Tom Brokaw. When you're a journalist, you have to be truthful. It's all you have as a commodity. If people think that you will intentionally lie to them, then they can't trust you. And if people can't trust you, they certainly aren't going to go to you for news and information. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to be honest. You can make mistakes, you can get facts wrong, but you have to come clean when that happens, and you have to be honest. What a fall. And there's another thing about the media. The higher you are, the harder they try to hit you. If he were just a reporter over at CNN, this would be a one-day story. But the fact that he is the number one ranked anchor in the land, I mean, he's it. He's the top dog in journalism. Then they're going to come after you big time. And that's what they're doing. High wind warning the whole through today. Winds subsiding tomorrow morning. Gusts up to 80 miles an hour out in the valley. 40 miles an hour here in the Anchorage Bowl. Sunshine today, highs in the mid-20s. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, folks. As you do, going about your way, employ a heart of gratitude. I promise you it'll make your life much better. Focus on the good. Don't focus on the negative. We're here every Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m., Dan Fagan Show. KOAN, 95.1 FM. That's the strongest signal. If you listen to us on 1080 a.m., try 95.1 FM in your car. I think you'll find the signal much stronger and better. If you live out in the valley, we're broadcasting out of Wasilla on KVNT 5.2 FM and then 1020 AM. And, of course, you can always go to the worldwide interweb. We stream every show, live, video and audio, on danfagan.us. If you missed some of the show and you want to hear what you missed, you can go to danfagan.us where we archive all the shows. You can watch every show we did this week if you want. Such a pleasure, such a privilege, such an honor to come in here and be in front of this mic every morning. So glad you found it. So glad you're part of the broadcast. Have a great weekend, folks. We'll see you Monday.